And so I found out later, like my peers were like, "Hey, when I first met you, I thought you were stuck up because you were like bragging about your blow dryer and flat iron." I was like, "What? Like, oh my God, no!" And now later in life, I'm realizing what that was. But at first I was kind of mad because I'm like, no one else. You guys didn't have that impression of anyone else, and I was in the circle talking to you guys the way you guys were talking to each other. So why did you have that impression of me?
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Immigrant Experience in America, a place where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants living in the United States and around the world. We, in recent times, have been researching, asking questions. Why are people leaving the United States? Everybody wants to come here, right? It's the country with the most demand for immigrants around the world. I mean, bar none, right? And so, but people are leaving. There's a lot going on here. And so we're talking to a few people to figure out why they're leaving, where they're going, and what's their immigrant experience in the countries that they're moving to. So today we have Nicole Singletary, otherwise known as Nikki. Welcome, Nicole.
Hey, Simone, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And Nikki's joining us from Puerto Viejo, Costa Rica.
Yes,
Welcome, welcome. So tell us, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. What time is it over there?
It's just after 2 p.m., so like 2:11.
Oh, wow, early in the afternoon. So we're
Yeah,
just 2 hours ahead of you then. Okay, not too bad.
yeah.
Okay. And what's the weather like today?
It's really hot. I haven't checked the temperature, but I know just when I was brushing my teeth, and I have a little window above my shower, and I just keep it open just so that the air is circulating, but I kept getting waves of heat.
I've been seeing a lot about Puerto Viejo, and I was just sharing that I would love to visit at some point. So let's just go from the top then and talk about a little bit about your heritage. I think you're not sure your full background, but you're from the U.S. We're in the U.S. And what was that like growing up here in the United States?
All right, sure. So I'm from Southern Maryland, and I make sure to make that distinction between DC because the culture is completely different. Like I'm from Waldorf, right? So it's not like I'm from like just outside of DC. So the culture is different, and I would have peers in like PG County. They'd be like, "Why do you talk like that?" So that's where I'm from. That's where I was born and raised. My parents are from the Carolinas, and so they were both born and raised there, and then came up later up a little north. So my dad spent some time in DC. My mom spent some time in New York. So then, they got married and they had their children and had me in Maryland and my other two sisters in like Rhode Island and Connecticut. But all my roots are in North Carolina. And so growing up, like very few black friends. So my neighborhood friends, like I lived in a cul-de-sac. So, none of them were black, which is okay, but I'm trying to set the context into what my upbringing was like, right? So, you start off in your classes in elementary school, and then as time went on, I got split away from my friends because I got put into like honors classes. So now there's even less black people that I'm interacting with. And that process continued as I go up grades, like the split happening more and being less around my black peers. Um, Again, which I didn't think was a big deal. But so insert going into college, I went to an HBCU. It was actually my dad's alma mater, North Carolina A&T in Greensboro. And that's where I got my computer science degree. And so that was my first experience with all Black people. I am in a city that has a lot of Black people as opposed to when I was living in Waldorf. And I'm going to a school with a lot of Black people. So I'm seeing the full range, Black excellence, funny people, spiritual people, etc. Even though I was kind of limited in Waldorf, and then anytime I go outside of it, it's like, oh, why you talk like that? So it felt like home, like it felt good. So then of course I leave. I studied abroad in college too. Also, that also provides some context into why I started traveling more. So then, I leave college and I go into the work world and you're back to like, you might be the only Black person on your team or something. And so as people talk, they bring up the HBCU conversation sometimes, and it's like, well, that's not like what you're going to experience in the real world. So why would I go there? And it's like, for me, the experience was invaluable because I didn't have that growing up. So insert, like, if I were to fast forward to me being here, it's happening again where I'm like, oh, this is what it's like living in a place where there's a lot of Black people, and they're not like me. Like, we're all from different backgrounds, right? So it's not like we're all from the East Coast in the U.S., but it's still harmonious, right? Versus other places where I've lived, and there's a bit of like friction if I'm talking about the U.S. Um, so I feel like I don't know if that was cohesive, but I was trying to go from like my upbringing and then be like, how it's like I didn't really have a lot of Black peers, got a lot of Black peers, and now that I'm in Puerto Viejo, it's coming around circle. Like, okay, this
Yes.
is nurturing
Right.
in a lot of different ways that I feel like it's hard to describe.
Wow. Wow. Where did you study overseas when you were in college?
Oh, I studied abroad in Cyprus. And so the way this happened was so I had an internship the summer of 2008 at IBM in Beaverton, Oregon. That was actually my first plane ride, by the way, flying to Beaverton, Oregon for that internship. And then my dad lost his job. And I was like, how am I going to pay tuition? And so I asked them, like, can I get a co op for the fall? And so I was able to prolong going back to school with this co op. So I did my co op in Raleigh in the IBM campus there. And so, I think once it was sort of solidified that he might not have the funding for me to go back in the spring, I'm trying to remember what triggered this decision, but it was like, I am going to study abroad. And so I was told, you need like a year to plan this. I planned mine that semester before. So fall 2008, I was looking like, what are my options? I still want to take my computer science classes. And so I missed a lot of deadlines because this is why they say you need to plan ahead. I missed a lot of deadlines. And so I only had a few options for me. And ironically, I was giving a contact for a woman. She did an exchange program. She was in South Korea, and she was telling me she was uncomfortable there because of racism. So I had knocked a few locations off the list because I wasn't sure. So what I was left with was Cyprus because it kind of like they grab a bunch of U.S. students and then pop them over there. They sort of hold our hands. That would have been my first time leaving the country. And then they speak English. My classes would have been in English, and I was able to take my computer science classes so that I wouldn't be behind or more behind by the time I got back. And so, yeah, in spring 2009, so that this was January 2009, right before the inauguration of Barack Obama, I took third flight of my life. Well, yeah, I took a flight to Beaverton, Oregon, and then I skydived. So that's on like, which flight was it? So, on one hand, I can count which flight it was that I ever taken in my life when I took my first international trip to Cyprus. And it was pretty cool. They have an interesting history. There's turmoil because of what happened in the 70s. I think it was the 70s, which was a split of the country itself. So there's like an illegal entity called the Northern Turkish Republic of Cyprus, and then there's Cyprus itself that's recognized as an actual country.
Oh.
Yeah, so we learned that history. We were staying in Nicosia, and it's also Lefkosia in like the, I guess, the Greek language. But Nicosia is more like the Western version, from what I understand. That city itself was also cut off, and so there's a split between Cyprus and the Turkish Northern Republic. And so going on a tour, like people will tell you like people who experienced what happened in the 70s will tell you like we had to flee our home, and I can go to the areas that are blocked off and I can see my house and I can never go back in there and get my things. It's like,
Wow.
yeah. So yeah, it was interesting learning about Cyprus. Every now and then I go to see like what's going on politically, because they were kind of asked, well, not they, but when we would have like presentations to like learn about what's going on, people will come in and say, hey, like, please talk to representatives because nobody is doing anything because we're buddy buddy with Turkey. So we're like, even though what happened to them was illegal. And so it's interesting. It's also interesting to be there and hear both sides. So we were in the South for our study abroad, but you can take tours in the North and they'll tell you what happened from their side too. And it's really unfortunate. Yeah, I studied abroad there. I don't have lasting friends from that, and that's like another thing that's part of my experience. And there was a few other. There was like another black girl, another girl who she was black, but she was mixed. I said but I shouldn't have said but anyways, and so which I wasn't like, oh, the black people, but I kind of just I go with people with a clear slate, right? Um, but I ended up learning later, like when we were all sort of meeting each other, and it's like, hey, like I'm from such and such, and like if you ever need this, like I have it. So I was like, oh hey guys, like I have like I bought like a flat iron and a blow dryer that works with the voltage here. So yeah. And so I found out later, like my peers were like, hey, when I first met you, I thought you were stuck up because you were like bragging about your blow dryer and flat iron. I was like, what? Like, oh my God, no. And now later in life, I'm realizing what that was. But at first I was like, dang, did I come out that way? And another part of me was like, I was kind of mad because I'm like, no one else, you guys didn't have that impression of anyone else. And I was in the circle talking to you guys the way you guys are talking to each other. So why did you have that impression of me? And there's other things that happened. And long story short, there are a few people that I still follow on social media. And I'm like, oh my God, look at your baby. There's like a few people who are like, I vibe with you. I met one person for drinks, they're cool. But then there's other people who I thought we were cool, but then it was kind of like, not really. And that was my experience with my study abroad in terms of like socially. Yeah.
All right, so you did the whole HBCU thing, and I guess a lot of people don't really contemplate that, which is interesting. But I find, in my perspective, I think it's important for people to have that experience because I went to a PWI, which they say primary white institution. You don't really feel catered to. You're just on your own. You have to figure things out. There's really no support system. They might be doing a little better these days. My brother is in a big school as well, and he says that there's folks there to really answer his questions and guide him. So maybe they're making more efforts. But I went to a very small liberal arts school, very small private liberal arts school, and there's really no support there.
Mhm.
99 plus percent was other, and there was really nothing for us. I just felt like I just had to, I figured out my way. There was no encouragement. Yeah, I wouldn't do that again.
Mhm.
So, but it is what it is. You really have to research. And I think a lot of immigrants come in and they just want to study, they just want to get in school. And even if they get a scholarship, then they're just going to work with it. But, are you going to come out of that experience being traumatized or feeling like your voice wasn't heard, you didn't have the best experience, but you have a degree? And how are those experiences going to live on with you for the rest of your life? So just do your research, talk to other people, study, and make sure you're making the right decision for you. But I would definitely have done an HBCU if I had to do it again. I didn't know when I first came in. I was just learning and just went to a local university. But if I had to do it, my cousin actually went to Hampton,
Mhm.
and that's when I got exposed to that world. And I was in the DC area too for about 10 years, and I saw and you have Howard and some others. So I do recognize the importance of that, especially for people of in the African diaspora. It's important, I think. Okay, all right. So a little bit about your heritage. So I'm wondering then, how do we get to Costa Rica? So you studied abroad. Then you finished university. Like, how did you get to the point of even considering living abroad? Like, what got you to that point of Costa Rica? Like, what were the events or circumstances why you want to live overseas?
I'm trying to remember what triggered that I want to pack up and leave. It might have been a friend who did the same thing. So maybe I'll start there. I mean, totally after the study abroad, I wanted to travel more. And there was like a whole period of time where I couldn't and didn't because nobody could come with me. And I was like, I don't know how to travel by myself. And I would try to ask people, and they're like, well, it's not safe. And so for years, I just didn't travel. And then I took my first solo trip in 2015, again, after people flaked out on me. So it was like, you know what, I'm just going to go. So I had the travel bug, and I've been doing a lot of solo travel. So then, let's say around 2020, maybe 2019, maybe 2018, I had a friend that we went to college together, and he left Texas. I think he got laid off, and so he left and was like, "I'm going to Mexico." And so he was living in Mexico, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool," you know. And he would be like, "You know, you should move too." And I'm just like, "I don't know how," you know. And then as time moved on, I got my dog. So then the question became, okay, well, even if I was ready to go, how would I fly him? Because he's a Chow Chow, and I don't want to put him in cargo. I'm scared. And so I'm like, I would ask, how are you guys like flying with your Chow Chow? And I never got a comfortable answer. I've gotten people who said, I did it. Like we flew from somewhere in Asia to here, like some super long flight. And they said, and you know, she probably wouldn't do it again because the dog just seemed uncomfortable. So I was like, I can't do that. So then fast forward to okay, 2023 last year. I when I bought a house back in 2018, I think. So I had this house, and I had a childhood friend living with me, her and her daughter. And so she said like, "Hey, I'm going to move out." You know, she didn't even meet a new guy. It was like a guy from our childhood. And it's like, "Oh, you guys are like a thing." And like they're all like frolicked off and married and stuff. But yeah, she was like, "We're going to be moving out." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So then I was like, what if I sold my house and used that money to just like leave? And so I kind of just, it was a decision that I made, but I didn't know how to do it. It was kind of like, I think I'm going to do this. I just don't know how. But that decision, right, or that manifesting, it kept like, as time went on, I got more and more information or confirmation or resources or something. And so that was last year when I said I'm going to go. Prior to that, I was scoping out Mexico, but I didn't know when I would get there. It was just I know I want to do this within like my 5-year plan. I changed my mind pretty swiftly about Mexico last year around the same time when I was making this decision to leave, and that's because me and the same friend went to Cancun. She went because she was supposed to meet up with someone, and then that flaked out. And so I said, "Hey, I'll just go with you." So that you're not by yourself. And so we went to Cancun, and I don't go to Cancun. I skip Cancun. I go to Hobart, I go to Bacalar, I go to Guadalajara, I go to Mexico City. I do not stay in Cancun. Cancun is very overrun with tourists. Um, and so they treated me like you tourists. Like it's not friendly. And that was the vibe I got. And yeah, got scammed. It was really, and it could have been worse. But it was just like, ooh.
That was the Cancun experience, and so you opted to go elsewhere.
Yeah. I opted to just not move to Mexico. I was like, as much as it felt like Mexico was calling me, the Cancun situation made me go, kind of on a spiritual level, like, go there. So then I pivoted, like, okay, Costa Rica. Um, I was there a few years ago for an uncle's birthday, and I was in Manuel Antonio, super touristy place. But what I remember from Costa Rica when I was there for my very brief time was the pura vida like attitude, and like the people, like they're great. And then the the country's beautiful also. This whole area, like the Americas are just they're beautiful. Or probably everywhere in the world is beautiful, right? Like this planet is a beautiful planet. Um and so I was enamored with that. I was trying to make sure I was using the right word, but I'll come back to that in a second. So I decided I'm going to move to Costa Rica, and so as time went on, there were different things that sort of confirmed I was on the right track. So I can be talking to a stranger, like, yeah, I'm thinking about moving to Costa Rica. Oh, wow. Like, I used to live there. Like, oh, okay. Or like a friend that I hadn't been in touch with for a long time. She was more like a work colleague that I knew through my sister. But we just haven't spoken in a long time. Nothing was really applicable for us to talk about. But then I see on Instagram that she posted some picture. I'm like, that looks like Costa Rica, like just some plants. Like the plants themselves look like Costa Rica. And so I messaged her and she was like, yeah, I'm in Costa Rica. Like I married someone here, so we had like a whole a talk over like Zoom or Google Meet or something. And it's like, wow, like it was like another confirmation, like somebody else that I know is there. Like I should try it out. There were a few other things too. I just kind of can't remember what they were. So June, we're now in June, and I'm like, I think I'm going to do this. It's not a I think, it's like I'm going to pull the trigger. And so I told my manager like, hey, get ready to start winding me down because I'm going to move out of the country. And I know that you guys don't hire people out of the country based on, the handbook. So I understand, just be prepared for me to leave in like August or something. He was like, but okay, but I really like you, and I really, like I would like to keep you. And we do have people who work out of the country, so it's possible. And I was like, okay. And so he talks to his manager, who's like the chief of engineering or something, and they work something out with me. They're like, we'll write a contract for this, and yeah, you can go to Costa Rica. And I was like, well, do I need a? They had actually just funded my a conference that I went to. So I was like, do I need to reimburse that? And they talked about it. And I was like, no, you don't have to reimburse it. I'm like, oh, And it was like, okay, do I bring the company laptop? Like, yeah, take it with you. It's like, oh, okay. So like, so
Everything's coming together.
it really came together. And I had already gotten my LLC before this, like in that December. So it was like, okay, you can just pay me through my LLC. So they wrote the contract with the LLC, and that's how I was able to retain my job. And this is what I do when I'm over here now. So that was June. So then August, like my roommate and her daughter, they move out, and I start prepping the house. September, or I think September, was I think that was when I started planning like I might leave before the house sells, especially since I was told I was getting my house still wasn't prepared to put on the market yet. And I was so inexperienced with that. Like I showed my realtor and she was like, okay, this is a fixer upper. And I was like, what? So there are so many more things I needed to do that I didn't know I needed to be done. So I was like, she's from Sotheby's. So the standards are really high. So it's like, oh my God, I have to go back and redo things that I thought were done properly. So it's just taking a while to get my house on the market. When we're in a fall, I missed September. I missed back to school, Labor Day. So now people who are looking for homes are probably in their homes. And so I was like, okay, let me figure out my power of attorney. I have to do that anyway since I'm going to be leaving the country. But let me figure out who's going to sign for me when I close. And so it was my friend and my sister that were up for bat, to be my power of attorney. And then my dad was my fallback. And so I left in October. By the time I left, me and my realtor did the final walkthrough, and she said, "This looks good." Like, and then I left, and it was like, we will be working together remotely. Um, so I left in October, and I didn't say how I left. I kept talking about like how will I find my dog. Um, so when it came to my dog, I ended up going on Facebook groups and then finding, this is gonna sound so bougie. I'm sorry, but not sorry. I ended up looking into private jets. I was like, I would take the money from my house and get a private jet for me and my puppy to just get us out of the country. And then the rest I can do on the road. If I want to go to Peru or something, we can just be on the road and just do pit stops. But I will not fly my dog in cargo. I can't. And so while I was looking into that, I found Facebook groups of people who do this and they sell the seats. There's a few of them that do it. There's one in Houston, there's one in Florida. I'm pretty sure there's many more. But I stopped at Florida because I was like, oh, I can just drive to Florida. I don't have to worry about like, okay, can we do a short trip and then, a short trip by a domestic plane, or should I just drive? So this company is called Para Air. Para Air. I feel like I'm saying that really bad, but
Mm-hmm.
you know. the word dog in Spanish, air. And they're really good. They had just started. So I think I was on their second inaugural flight. And so me and Taco took a road trip down to Florida. You know, we made some pit stops, met up with my uncle. He's got my car. That was like another thing I needed to pass off. And then we had a seat on this private jet to Liberia, Costa Rica. And then from Liberia, my Airbnb host picked me up and drove me to San Jose. Um, so we're living in San Jose. I'm living in a high rise in the Savannah neighborhood. Savannah, it's this huge park. It makes you think of Central Park. It's a huge park. So it's a really cool area. So this high rise is Alice in Wonderland theme, super upscale. Like they had like laundry, they had like a dog park and a pool on the eighth floor. They had co-working spaces. It was really nice. Super temporary because I didn't want to stay in the city. So October. So later in October, I'm trying to figure out the timeline of the house because I was telling you about my house. Um, when my realtor pulled the trigger to put it on the market, before it was like public, and she just pulled the trigger for other realtors to see. Um, she had people that were interested, and so one of the first, I mean, like the first two people that saw the house, they ended up buying it. So it came off the market pretty fast. I don't even know if it ever went like publicly like list. It was kind of like, oh, now it's in closing, like, oh snap. It happened really fast. So
Wow.
closed like first week of November, and my friend physically went and did the closing, which is awesome. And I also had another friend she was my neighbor, and her family helped me tremendously in terms of like making sure the house was okay, moving things to and from my storage, all of that. And so I had a lot of support, at least from my friends, when it came to leaving. And so my house getting sold and the closing process was a little bit like a roller coaster, but it getting sold and closing so fast was kind of like another like you're on the right path. Like this is good. Like we're good.
Wow. So you moved, you're in Costa Rica. Wow.
Hmm.
That's a big move. Did you have any Spanish? Like what is the country like? English communication, getting around as a new person living in this country. What is it like in your first few weeks?
So I had hired a Spanish tutor since I can't remember when I started working with him. 2018, probably 2018, 2019. I started working with a Spanish tutor. So I've been taking Spanish, but it's also not super. Sometimes when he tutors me, it's structured, but it's a lot of conversational, and I'm not super like a studious, so it's kind of like I just take in what I remember. If I don't remember it, then it's like oops, because no one's quizzing me. So I was like, so I don't mind paying him monthly so that we can just have conversational Spanish. And little by little, I do wind up picking up things. So living in San Jose, um, I did leave with Spanish, which my Spanish isn't that great. I mean, people would be like, I speak English. Just go ahead." It's like, okay. Okay. Um, so I would leave with Spanish and then I would use a translator if I could. One time I went to get my fingerprints done, which was a whole thing. And like I'm talking to the lady and I'm understanding mostly, but then she's like, what residence do you need here? Like working residence? I was like, no, for to live. And she's like, but what kind? I'm like, to live? Like, okay, if you don't know Spanish, this isn't gonna work out. She said that in Spanish. I was like, I don't know what to do. And so yeah, the lady who's working on my residency, she's great by the way. Her name's Celeste. I was able to call her and she worked that out. So there is a little bit of like anxiety with like, oh my god, my Spanish isn't that good. But you will come across people who speak English if you wave a white flag. But I try not to. I don't want to lead with English because I'll get too comfortable.
Right, right. And most parts of the world, you'll find people, a lot of places who have some level of English to
Mhm,
communicate, especially in tourism, right?
mhm,
So that's good that you're letting yourself practice and get immersed into the language. You'll develop it after a while because you're living there. You're fully immersed into it.
mhm.
But that's awesome. So you get settled, and so how do you get to Puerto Viejo? I'm so happy that the job worked out. You're earning U.S. dollars, and you're living wherever you want to live. How
Absolutely.
amazing!
Absolutely. Yeah, so okay, I learned about Puerto Viejo during a webinar. The woman who does the webinar, her name is Davia. I'm really bad with names. And that's how Puerto Viejo was put in my ear. Actually, Limon was put in my ear prior to that because a woman that I met, at the airport, we were like in the line for immigration. She said all the black people are in Limon. And I was like, oh, okay. So then Davia's webinar was another thing in my ear about Limon. So when I made the decision to move to Costa Rica, it was like, I'm going to try things out, but I do want to go to Puerto Viejo and see if I like it. Because I had not been in that country long enough prior to me moving. I was just in Manuel Antonio, super touristy spot. But I wasn't there enough to know, do I want to live in this country? But that's okay because I can try things out, and if I don't like it, I just leave. It's fine. So I arrived in San Jose, and I stayed there for a while because I knew that when it came to my residency, I would need to do things like getting my fingerprints done. And then when I felt like, I don't think I need to stay here anymore, so I went to Cartago, which is actually a little cooler temperature wise, and it is closer to the mountains. So it's like a nice change. And it's like the old capital of Costa Rica, which I thought was interesting. Cartago's really nice. I had planned in my head, like, okay, next stop Puerto Viejo. And a super sweet thing happened. My Airbnb host in Cartago said that she'll drive me because I think I was trying to ask her, like, hey, I need a driver to Puerto Viejo. And she was like, oh, let me check. And then she said, I'll drive you. And I was like, what? And so, I asked her, like, just let me know how much you charge, like gas, tolls. My dog is very fluffy. And so he's going to leave first. So, you're going to need to clean your car and all that jazz. She's like, yeah. So she charged me, I actually can't remember, but it was the number I was okay with. And that was it's a 5-hour drive. So it was me, her, and her friend who drove, said she wouldn't be by herself driving back. So she drove me here, and it was so super sweet. And I actually just saw her last Saturday while I was walking Taco because she doesn't come here often. When I last spoke to her, she said, oh, I haven't been there since I dropped you off. So I'm walking Taco, and this car like pulls up into like a parking lot in front of me. And she goes, hey. And I'm like, oh, hey. And I forgot she doesn't speak English. So I'm like, oh my God, it's so great to see you. And it's like, oh, I got to switch. It was really nice. Like we caught up for a little bit. She said she was going shopping nearby. And, I told her where I was staying and all that jazz. So it was like, oh, it was so great to see her. And, she pet Taco, my dog. So that was a really awesome experience for her to, one, be willing to drive me. And then I told her, like, you guys can stay in my Airbnb so you don't have to worry about where to stay. And, we keep in touch sometimes. She said she'll take me to Guanacaste if I want her to. And it's like, okay, I'll take her up on that offer, maybe later. But it's nice to know that it reinforced the Pura Vida culture for me. The fact that someone was so nice and so willing to do that. And I have more examples of that too, as I've met people and they've helped me. And it's like, oh, I love you guys. So yeah, that's how I ended up in Puerto Viejo in January. The end of January, actually.
Join us again next time for part 2 of this episode. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.